I was particularly struck by no interest, and my own observation of the only way I've ever been able to overcome any addictions is not through trying to, but just losing interest, and then you're over it. I know that he's speaking to it in the ultimate sense, but so my question is twofold. How does one develop that capacity for no interest on the one hand, but also nourish the awestruckness of every moment, of every interaction, of every, just the beauty of it all?
The one who appreciates that beauty is the one who is disinterested, okay? Because when there is a desire, there isn't really an appreciation of the beauty. The desire to possess the beauty takes over, and then the beauty is actually lost. And that's why whatever you desire and then you get buyer's remorse along with it and say, oh, wait a minute, that isn't what I thought I was going to get, right? And it's a disappointment. And everyone has gone through that disappointment because the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, as that cliche has stated and we've all heard many times. The beauty is consciousness itself. The consciousness produces the beauty. It's not that there are beautiful objects out there that I want or that I have an interest in. But the consciousness itself is a product of, as an ego, of that beauty, okay? And so when you realize who I am, when you realize that, that is the source of beauty that then flows through as the essential being of your character, and you become the very beauty that you thought was in the other. And that beauty is also love, because you always love beauty, right? And it brings joy. And so all of the powers of consciousness that are part of fulfillment come with that realization, that you are that. You're not the ego wanting it. That's simply a program that is soulless. It has no consciousness of its own, because all it can do is repetitively desire the same kind of an object that it thought it wanted in the past and didn't get, and right? So it's going after something that isn't even there. It's a past projection on the present. And when you recognize that you were not in reality at all as an ego, and all those things you thought beautiful were really not, then you realize the true beauty that is your own being, and that beauty shines and will be appreciated by all who can recognize the real essence of what beauty is. And that beauty brings equanimity and peace and freedom from any interest in anything else, because nothing else is real but that. Does that help?
Yes, very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a very important question that you asked. Namaste.
I'm thinking a lot about what you say about the finite mind and how it can never conceive of the infinite. In my few glimpses, so far only glimpses, but there'll be more, of thinking, of being in that infinite, I say to myself, why would you want to go back to the finite mind? It's almost like it's habitual, but I'm not falling for it like I used to, not at all. As a matter of fact, it's become old hat, stale, dry. But to maintain, and you've taught me this in many different ways, to keep that infinite feeling of self-love, of emanating it to everyone in the field, and being part of this. Is it really just a constant discipline, a constant focus that keeps you there?
No, actually it isn't. It's the letting go of any interest in the thinking apparatus, okay? So even the question, why would I want to go back to the finite mind, comes from the finite mind. It's presence that has no thought. So you can't even call it self-love, right? Because there is no self. It's an absence of self in terms of ego self. It's an absence of an individual. It is the whole. It is the presence of God as the one consciousness. You do not exist. You're a fictional character, as is this one, as is everyone. All that is real is the one light, the one intelligence, the one beauty, right? That is real. And yes, there is a state of awe, but that awe brings simply the total surrender and oneness with that. And then there is no one to ask any questions or to even focus, because focus implies that you are separate from that which you're focusing on. So there's no one either to focus or be distracted. All of that disappears.
Thank you. It sounds very wonderful state to be in.
It is, and it's your true nature at this very moment.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Skanda. Namaste.
You brought up again in the teaching tonight, and I was thinking about it just before the class. This idea of the character, like not being, I think you call it like being indifferent to the character, or it doesn't matter what the character's doing. And in the past, when you've had that teaching, it's kind of frustrated me, or I think Yogaraj even brought it up in a Jnana video once, so I could relate to how he expressed it. That to me sounds ludicrous, like we can't just let egos act out. And then tonight, I loved how you said it, because you said it doesn't matter, but when you're indifferent to it, then you become moved by the Tao. So it felt like it healed that teaching for me, because it showed me, oh no, it doesn't mean you will, it changes, or the character would change. One of the questions would be, there is obviously some in between that state of being indifferent to the character and then the Tao taking over. Like, how quick does that happen? And what do we do in the meantime? Or what happens in that little spot in the middle?
Okay.
Sorry, it's a long question.
No, it's a good question. Before I answer that part of the question, first of all, let me point out that as an ego, you do not have control over your thoughts or the state of your being. Like that voice came up, you didn't ask it to come up, it came up, right? You do not have control. And if it turns out that something happens that causes you to get angry and act out in some way, you can't stop it anyway, nor can anyone else. It's going to happen, right? So the more that you try to repress it and oppress people in order to make them rigidly follow the rules and do everything right, the more that it will actually create glitches, right? That's how that works internally, and it works communally. Right? So the more there is compassion and acceptance and release of that kind of let's say, dogmatic assertion of the Dharma, right, and of the way it should be, the more that the capacity of the heart to open and love will create a situation in which things will continue to become ever more harmonious, right? Because it's based on love and trust, and not on worry and paranoia and all of that. But it's important that you realize that as an ego, you do not control anything regarding the thinking apparatus. And at some point, and for some this happens at an earlier age than for others, dementia may even hit. And you won't be able to remember things and think clearly, and there will be glitches, and things will happen, and you have no control over that, okay? So, and you have no control over the symptoms in the body, or its aging, or its karma, its destiny. All of that is out of your control anyway. The only control you have, the only power you have, is the letting go of identification with the character, okay? It's when you realize you are not the character, that's when, and only when, you will lose interest in the character, okay? And that's why there is no mean time between one and the other. If you try to lose interest as the character, no. You'll become indifferent in a negative way, like not caring about people and not being compassionate and loving, etc. So that's not the way. The way is to do what Ramana has said, ask, who am I? And you'll realize I am not the character. The character is a bunch of thoughts that arise in the mind. They're objects in the mind. But who is the witness of those objects? That one is not subject to the mind. And it's that freedom from the mind and its conditionings, etc., that enable you to then put it to sleep, so that it no longer disturbs you, and simply the beauty of the intelligence of the Tao or of God consciousness will then flow through the character. It doesn't take time, but it does take the faith that is willing to surrender to the unknown, right? Because the soul is not known by the ego. But when you ask, who am I? And you realize, well, wait a minute, I'm not the ego, because I see it's a program that I don't control, then that not the ego, not ego, neti, I'm not that, I'm not body or mind or anything. That is what brings you into what the Buddhists call the emptiness, the shunyata. And then that state, when you abide in it and don't go back into thoughts, but you stay in the stillness, then you will be filled with grace and the ego will disappear.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Namaste. Beautiful.
So this conversation of the ego has no control of things that come, and I was curious about superstitions, because it's been coming up a lot, and I can see my mind. I'm believing in them, and I'm wanting to, dissolve it in a way. And I see it coming more and more, and it controls myself in a way.
Okay, but you know it's superstition. That
Yes.
means you know it's false.
But I feel like it's like paranoia in a way, that it's paranoid if.
Every ego is paranoid. At the very core of every ego, there's paranoia. Because when the ego is formed, you were a helpless baby, okay? And as a helpless, tiny infant that couldn't even turn over in your crib, can't do anything, can't feed yourself, you are totally at the mercy of conditions. And if those conditions are not perfect, so that even before you cry for the mother to come, she's there and giving you the breast milk, and everything is flowing in a spontaneous way in which you believe you are the one who caused it and you and the mother are one. At a certain moment when that unity gets ruptured and you realize you are just this helpless little thing that is at the mercy of the world, that paranoid worry begins to become the core paradigm of reality, and superstitions then fester in the form of all the possible things that could go wrong. And once the sanskara of awfulization comes in, you will start to awfulize everything. And even if things were perfect, you will worry, oh, but they won't last, it'll go wrong, I know. And then that will create the very glitch that you were afraid of. And so what you have to realize is you are so powerful that your superstitions will become self-fulfilling prophecies. So you don't have the luxury of holding on to that superstition. It itself is dangerous, right? It's like holding on to some electric fence, you're going to get electrocuted by your own superstition. So you have to stop being attached to them, stop believing them, because your ego thinks the superstition protects you. You know, if I worry about it, I'll keep it from happening. But no, it doesn't work like that. It's the opposite. And then even if it doesn't happen, you have suffered as if it had happened. And so you make your life miserable when it has no need to be so, right? So when you become disinterested in your mind and your character, and you realize you're not that superstitious mental program, and you surrender to the real, it will completely dissolve and you'll be free of all of that. But you have to be willing to let it go and to know it's not you, and to know that you do not benefit at all by having those superstitious thoughts. No, you're only creating a self-cursing program. Why do that, right? And so when there is that total surrender to the real, it will be gone, because it's a fictional character that you're keeping alive in order to be worried about everything, right? What's the point of having such a program? It doesn't help you in any way. When you recognize that, you will dissolve it and live in peace. And that's what you're meant to do.
Thank you. I feel much more peaceful.
Namaste. I hope that this was helpful to all of those who are in the process of realizing your perfection, your infinite and eternal beauty and light and power and love and goodness and purity, and that there can be a complete letting go of any unreal identification with body or with the past or with desire or fear or superstitions or any kind of feeling of lack that then projects that that only by having something other will you be fulfilled. And that illusion that creates the ever more tight screw of life will be released completely, and you will be able to live a life of nobility, of freedom, of complete wisdom, empowerment, and immunity from the conditions that the illusory existence may present. And that is the victory of God consciousness over the ignorance and delusion of the ego mind. And this is the moment for that victory to be fully achieved. Blessings to all of you for attaining, through the simple act of surrender to the flame, to the realization that you are the flame, to shine with that divine, luminous power of clarity and joy. Namaste.
Namaste.